Sir, this scale doesn't lie. Your bag is overweight. You don't belong in first class. The words sliced through the boarding gate, sharp with judgment, aimed at Samuel Clark, a dignified black man in his late 60s. His carry-on sat still on the metal platform, the numbers blinking wrong, tampered with by the very hands that now tried to strip him of dignity. Passengers shifted uneasily. A few raised their phones, capturing the moment. The air was thick with whispers, some doubting him, others quietly outraged. Yet Samuel didn't raise his voice. He simply lifted his gaze, calm, unshaken, while the attendant pressed harder, desperate to push him aside. What no one in that terminal imagined was how quickly everything would change. Within minutes, papers would spill from his briefcase, and the truth would thunder across the cabin. The man they tried to humiliate was the new CEO of the entire airline. Where are you listening to this story from today? Drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because the twist ahead will leave you breathless. Now, let's begin. The departure lounge at Gate 17 hummed with the sound of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and travelers impatiently scrolling through their phones. In the middle of it all stood Mr. Samuel Clark, a tall black man in his late 60s, silver hair close-cropped, his posture dignified but relaxed. He had placed his carry-on bag onto the chrome scale at the first-class boarding counter. The digital numbers blinked once, then twice, before the machine chirped. "Overweight," announced Linda Matthews, the chief flight attendant. Her voice was sharp, carrying an authority that seemed to stretch beyond the plastic badge pinned to her blazer. Samuel raised an eyebrow. "That can't be right. I checked it at home. 22 pounds exactly." Linda leaned forward, pressing a button on the scale. The numbers flickered again, higher this time. She folded her arms. "Sir, our policy is clear. First-class baggage must meet the requirements. This bag exceeds the limit. You'll need to remove items or move to coach." Heads turned. Travelers paused mid-step. A few whispered, while one young woman angled her phone discreetly, recording. Samuel's tone remained calm. "Ma'am, would you please reset the scale? Just to confirm." Linda's smile was thin, almost practiced. "I already did. Several times. It's overweight. You'll need to comply." From the back of the line, a man in a baseball cap muttered, "Figures. Always trying to sneak extra in first class." His words weren't loud, but they traveled. Samuel inhaled slowly, holding himself steady. He wasn't about to give Linda or the crowd the outburst they seemed to expect. "I purchased this ticket 3 weeks ago. My seat is 1A. My bag is within regulation." Linda tapped the scale again. The numbers jumped higher still. Too high. Even from a few steps away, it looked wrong. Jessica Tran, a younger attendant shadowing Linda, frowned. She had used the same equipment earlier, and the calibration had seemed fine then. But Linda didn't look at her. She leaned in closer to Samuel, her voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "Sir, this section is reserved for our premium passengers, people who understand our standards." Samuel met her eyes. He did not flinch. "I understand perfectly." The tension spread like smoke. A group of college students nearby began whispering, one of them lifting her phone higher. A businessman glanced up from his laptop, watching with quiet disapproval. Linda lifted the bag from the scale with exaggerated strain. "This feels over. I don't care what you say. It cannot remain here. You'll need to step aside and rebook in economy, or remove yourself from this line." Samuel straightened, his shoulders squaring. His voice, when it came, was low but steady. "Are you telling me I do not belong here?" The silence that followed was heavier than any bag. Jessica shifted uncomfortably, then opened her mouth. But Linda cut her off with a glare. "You heard me," Linda said. Step aside. For the briefest moment, Samuel considered the weight of it all, the years of quiet dismissals, of people measuring his worth, not by his actions, but by his skin, his age, his quiet dignity. He placed his boarding pass gently on the counter. The bold letters read, "First class, seat 1A." Somewhere behind him, a voice whispered, "He's got a first-class ticket, though." Another voice responded, "Doesn't matter. Look at him." Samuel's jaw tightened. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. Instead, he looked down at his wristwatch, a heavy gold timepiece that glinted beneath the fluorescent light. He tapped the face once, as though checking how much longer he was willing to let this charade continue. Linda, noticing the watch, faltered for half a second. Then she snapped back, raising her chin. "Rules are rules. Either you adjust your luggage, or you don't fly first class." The murmurs swelled now. Jessica's phone buzzed in her pocket, a notification from the crew channel. She glanced at the screen, then quickly looked back at Samuel. Her eyes lingered just a second too long, as if she had recognized his name, though she said nothing. Samuel reached for his carry-on, lifting it effortlessly with one hand. He set it back down on the floor with a quiet thud. "I'll wait here," he said evenly, "until someone decides to treat me with the same respect given to every other paying passenger." The words landed harder than any raised voice could. An older white man in line sighed loudly. "Just let him through already. He's got the ticket." But Linda crossed her arms, refusing to yield. Around them, the terminal felt as though it were holding its breath. Phones tilted, cameras recording, the story already leaping onto screens beyond Gate 17. And still, Samuel Clark stood in place, silent and unmovable. The crowd at Gate 17 didn't disperse. If anything, the tension thickened. What should have been a routine boarding had turned into a spectacle, with Samuel Clark at its center. He stood calmly, his bag at his feet, his boarding pass still resting on the counter. From 2 rows back, Angela Morris, a graduate student with braids tucked under a knit cap, nudged her friend. "You see that? He didn't even blink. Most folks would be shouting by now." Her friend, phone in hand, whispered back, "He's too calm. Like, he's done this dance before." A man in a suit, Richard Cole, lowered his glasses. "That watch he's wearing," he muttered, "that's not off the rack. That's hand-assembled. Worth more than my car." But Linda Matthews, still clutching the bag like it carried contraband, pressed the issue. "Sir, either step aside, or I will call security." Samuel's eyes flickered toward her badge, then back to his watch. "Do what you need to do." The line buzzed with murmurs. Some passengers pulled out earbuds, curious now. Others raised their phones higher, capturing the moment. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking, "Why won't they let the man sit in his seat?" The mother hushed him quickly, glancing nervously at Linda. Jessica Tran, the junior attendant, shifted uncomfortably. Her phone buzzed again with another crew alert. This time, she read it. Her eyes widened. The message carried a single instruction. "Prepare for priority guest boarding. Name, Samuel Clark." Her throat tightened. She looked at Samuel, then back at Linda. But Linda was already signaling toward the security desk, with a sharp tilt of her chin. At that exact moment, Samuel's phone rang. The tone was soft, restrained, almost old-fashioned. He answered, without moving from his spot. "Yes," he said quietly. "I understand. Begin without me. I'll join when I can." A pause. Then his next words. "Make sure the documents are in place. The vote doesn't wait for my presence." The line stilled. His voice wasn't loud, but every syllable carried weight. A businessman glanced up from his tablet. A college kid froze mid-swipe on TikTok. Jessica actually dropped her pen. "The vote?" Angela whispered. "What vote?" No one answered. Samuel ended the call with a small nod, then slipped the phone back into his jacket pocket. He didn't explain himself. Linda, trying to seize control again, raised her voice. "Sir, that's enough. Security will escort you to the coach section. This is a premium cabin, and we cannot allow disruption." Her words hung in the air, brittle and hollow. The murmurs grew louder now. "Premium? He paid for that ticket. Why's she pressing so hard? Something's not right here." Jessica swallowed hard. She looked at Samuel again, this time with something that wasn't just doubt, it was recognition. She'd seen his name before. Not in the passenger logs, but in a headline she couldn't quite place. Samuel bent down, adjusted the handle of his carry-on, and then stood tall once more. The movement was fluid, unhurried, deliberate like a man who controlled his own time. Richard Cole leaned toward Angela. "I don't know who he is," he whispered. "But people who talk like that on the phone, people who look at a watch like that, they're not ordinary." Angela nodded slowly. "And she jerked her chin at Linda, is digging her own grave." Linda tried to glare the whispers into silence, but the momentum was no longer hers. The air had shifted. The passengers weren't just watching a man being humiliated. They were watching something unravel. Something bigger than baggage scales and boarding passes. Jessica finally spoke, her voice low but firm. "Miss Matthews, maybe we should wait. There's something in the crew messages. His name came through." Linda snapped her head toward her. "Do not interfere, Jessica. He's not special. He's just stalling." But the doubt had already planted itself, not just in Jessica, but in the entire crowd. Every glance at Samuel now carried curiosity, even reverence. Samuel, for his part, didn't say another word. He simply folded his arms across his chest and stood like a monument. Calm, steady, unyielding. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Linda Matthews looked unsettled. The low hum of the terminal had turned into a restless murmur. Phones tilted higher. Passengers leaned closer. Samuel Clark stood like a pillar in the storm, his carry-on resting neatly by his side, his boarding pass still untouched on the counter. Linda Matthews tried to reclaim control. "Sir, this is my final warning. If you refuse to comply, you will be escorted off this flight." He glanced at his watch again, as if measuring not the minutes until departure, but the patience he had left to lend her. And then, his phone buzzed. Not the soft chime from before this was sharper, more urgent. He slid it from his pocket, pressed it to his ear, and his tone shifted. "Yes, I'm aware." His voice was calm but decisive, carrying across the waiting area. "No. Don't delay the session on my account. Start the vote. I'll join when I've resolved a small situation." Several heads turned. A vote? A session? Passengers exchanged wide-eyed looks. A young man in a hoodie muttered, "What kind of regular traveler talks like that?" Samuel continued, "Make sure the files are in front of the board. Directive 4 must be reviewed today. If it isn't ratified, the window closes. You understand the stakes." He paused, listening, then replied quietly, "Yes, proceed. I'll be there shortly." The call ended, but the echo of his words lingered. Board. Directive 4, ratified. This wasn't small talk. This wasn't a man chatting about dinner plans. From row 3, Angela Morris gripped her friend's arm. "Did you hear that? The board? Who even talks like that, unless they're in charge of something big?" Her friend whispered back, "What if he's somebody, like a senator or a CEO?" Richard Cole, the suited man who'd noticed Samuel's watch earlier, shook his head slowly. "That wasn't a request he made. That was an order. I've been in corporate meetings my whole career. That's the way executives speak when the room listens." Linda flushed red, the authority slipping from her grasp. She jabbed her finger toward Samuel. "You cannot make phone calls while being processed. This is a disruption. Hand me your device, immediately." He looked at her like a parent looks at a child. mid-tantrum measured patient, unwilling to indulge. No. Just that one syllable. And the crowd shifted audibly. The younger attendant, Jessica Tran, glanced at her own phone again. The crew channel had updated with a new notification. Priority guest Clark. Immediate clearance required. She swallowed hard and looked at Samuel once more, the pieces aligning in her mind. Linda noticed her hesitation. Jessica, stop gawking and assist me. We're moving him to coach. Jessica didn't move. She whispered instead, Ma'am, I think you should check the system again. His name just... But Linda cut her off. System errors happen. He doesn't belong here. The whispers from the passengers grew into low voices now, words slipping past Linda's brittle insistence. He said directive. That's corporate language. Look at him. He's not even sweating. Why would security matter if he's just some random guy? A mother with 2 children clutched her boarding passes tighter, muttering, I want to know who that man is before I get on that plane. Samuel bent down, adjusted the zipper of his bag, then stood again with deliberate grace. He looked over the crowd briefly, his eyes meeting strangers with a quiet steadiness that only fueled their speculation. Then he spoke, not loudly, but enough to carry. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay you've all endured. This isn't how travel should be. Wasted minutes, misplaced dignity. He let the words hang, then added, but some delays, I assure you, lead to necessary changes. Phones captured every word. The live stream counters ticked upward as viewers poured in. Linda stammered, You don't get to make speeches here. You are a passenger, nothing more. The line between authority and desperation was clear now. Her voice trembled, while Samuel's carried like calm thunder. Angela whispered again, awe creeping into her tone. He doesn't sound like a passenger. He sounds like someone who owns the whole damn gate. Jessica's fingers hovered above her phone screen. She wanted to say it out loud, wanted to confirm the name glowing in her crew messages, but fear of Linda's reprimand kept her silent. Still, her darting eyes betrayed the truth. She knew exactly who Samuel Clark was. And within that gate, among restless passengers and rising voices, the balance had already shifted. Samuel Clark was no longer just a man fighting for a seat. He was a man revealing, inch by inch, that the seat might actually belong to him. The announcement board above Gate 17 flashed. Flight 261 to New York. Final call. But no one moved. The real show wasn't the plane. It was the quiet standoff unfolding by the counter. Samuel Clark stood motionless, arms folded, while Linda Matthews continued to bark orders as if volume could cover cracks in authority. Security is on its way. Sir, you'll be escorted out in moments. I suggest you cooperate before this escalates. But the escalation had already begun, and not in the way Linda intended. Samuel pulled a small leather notebook from his jacket pocket. He opened it calmly, clicking a pen with deliberate precision. Then he began writing. What are you doing? Linda demanded. Recording. Samuel said simply. Documenting every word, every instruction, every violation. The way he said documenting made passengers glance at each other uneasily. This wasn't the frantic scribbling of a man desperate to prove his innocence. It was systematic, methodical, like he'd done this before, on bigger stages, with higher stakes. Jessica Tran felt her pulse quicken. She had just received another crew message. This one wasn't vague. It read, Subject, Clark, do not escalate. Await confirmation. Her eyes shot to Linda, but Linda ignored her, doubling down. You think writing in a notebook will change your seat? Rules are rules. Samuel didn't answer. He lifted his phone, snapped a photo of the baggage scale display, then one of Linda's badge. Passengers leaned in, whispering. A businessman muttered, That's how you build a case. Angela Morris whispered to her friend. He's not fighting with her. He's building evidence, like a lawyer. Or? She trailed off, realizing the weight of her own thought. The murmurs thickened, feeding the tension. Phones were no longer held discreetly. They were raised boldly now. One man near the window whispered into his live stream, "He's documenting everything. I swear, it feels like he's about to sue the entire airline." Linda's jaw tightened. "Put the phone away, sir. Filming isn't permitted without authorization." Samuel didn't lower his camera. He spoke in the same steady tone, audible enough for the crowd. When policy is used as a weapon, documentation becomes protection. It was a line that cut through the space like steel. Jessica's breath caught. She knew then he wasn't reacting. He was guiding. Every move, every word, was part of something larger. The uniformed security officer, David Morales, arrived, his radio buzzing at his side. "What's the issue here?" Linda rushed to answer. Passenger refuses to comply. Overweight luggage, disrupting boarding. Morales studied Samuel, who simply handed over his boarding pass without protest. Seat 1A, paid in full. He showed the photo of the scale. The digits blinking inconsistently. Morales frowned. "This looks wrong," Morales muttered. Linda snapped, "The system is fine. He doesn't belong in first class." The crowd reacted audibly. A woman gasped. Someone whispered. She actually said it out loud. Samuel didn't raise his voice. He simply turned to Morales. "Officer, please note that statement." Morales blinked. He scribbled it down in his own pad. For the first time, Linda looked shaken. Across the terminal, the energy shifted. Passengers were no longer passive witnesses. They were judges, jurors, commentators. Phones streamed live. Every new phrase from Samuel became a headline in the making. Jessica whispered, barely audible, "He's not here to argue. He's here to activate something." Angela caught the words and nodded slowly. "Exactly. He's moving pieces we can't see yet." And Samuel, still calm, still steady, clicked his pen closed. "We'll wait for your headquarters to weigh in. Until then, I suggest no further assumptions are made about where I belong." He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. But the silence after his words carried the weight of inevitability. Something larger than this gate, larger than this flight, had already begun. The terminal at Gate 17 no longer felt like a waiting area. It felt like a courtroom, every phone camera, a witness stand, every whisper of testimony. Samuel Clark remained calm, his notebook tucked neatly under one arm. Officer Morales had stopped pressing him, unsettled by Linda Matthews's slip of the tongue. The weight of those words, "He doesn't belong in first class," hung in the air. The first ripple came from Jessica Tran. She glanced at her phone again. Another crew message flashed. Priority update. Clark name verified. Await headquarters. Her pulse spiked. She looked at Samuel, then quickly shoved the phone back into her pocket, her face pale. 2 seats over, Angela Morris leaned into her phone camera. "Y'all, something's happening here. That man's not ordinary. They're checking his name in the system right now. I can feel it." Her live stream counter ticked upward, comments flying so fast she couldn't read them. A businessman in line, Richard Cole, typed furiously on his laptop. He wasn't recording, he was searching. He muttered under his breath, "Clark. Samuel Clark. Why does that sound familiar?" Behind him, an older woman adjusted her scarf, whispering to her husband. He carries himself like he's used to boardrooms, not boarding lines. Inside the staff channel, emails pinged back and forth. One line stood out. Verify. Immediately. Clark is connected to executive session. Jessica caught only a glimpse as her supervisor scrolled past, but the words burned in her memory. Executive session. Meanwhile, Linda Matthews doubled down, her voice cutting across the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, please ignore this disruption. We'll resume boarding shortly." But nobody moved. Phones stayed high. Whispers swelled. Samuel quietly raised his pen again, jotting another note. The deliberate sound of ink scratching paper seemed louder than Linda's commands. Officer Morales shifted his weight. He wasn't ready to side with Samuel, but something in his gut told him this wasn't standard procedure. He radioed softly, possible escalation, passenger documents check out, requesting further instructions. Static crackled, then silence. Headquarters wasn't rushing to back Linda. The second ripple came from a slip of paper. Samuel's boarding pass had slid slightly off the counter edge. Jessica reached to steady it, her eyes catching the bold print. Priority guest, flagged. She sucked in a breath, almost dropping it. Her hands trembled as she looked up. "Miss Matthews," she whispered. "His ticket, it's coded. Priority guest," Linda snapped. "Don't you dare say that out loud." But it was too late. The man beside Jessica had heard. He nudged his wife. "Priority guest," he repeated softly. Within seconds, the phrase was bouncing through the line like an echo. Priority guest. Priority guest. Priority guest. Angela caught it on her stream. "You hear that? He's a priority guest. Whatever that means. It's bigger than any of us thought." Her comments exploded. "He's a CEO. He's government. He's someone huge." The third ripple came from Samuel himself. His phone buzzed again. He answered quietly, but this time his voice carried with authority. "Yes, I understand. Tell them the directive will not wait. Put everything in motion. I'll confirm in person." Richard Cole froze mid-typing. Directive. Motion. Confirm. He looked up at Samuel like the pieces had just clicked. "My God," he whispered. "He's not just some executive. He's higher." Jessica's throat was dry. She couldn't look away from Samuel now. Her mind replayed the crew messages, the coded ticket, the directive, everything lined up. Linda tried one last time, her voice rising, brittle with desperation. "Sir, enough games. You will step into coach seating or you will not fly." Samuel closed his notebook with a soft snap. The sound silenced the gate more effectively than her shouting ever had. He looked at Morales, not Linda. "Officer, I suggest you prepare your report carefully. What's unfolding here will not be measured by minutes, but by consequences." The cameras caught it all the way. Morales hesitated. The way Linda's jaw tightened, the way Samuel's calm presence seemed to draw the entire room into his orbit. And in that moment, everyone knew. This wasn't about a bag, or a seat, or even a single flight. Something larger was moving. The system itself had begun to tilt, and Samuel Clark was the one pressing the lever. The crowd at Gate 17 had gone from restless to riveted. What began as a petty baggage dispute now pulsed with the electricity of something historic. Every eye tracked Samuel Clark. Every phone camera framed his calm profile against the chaos around him. Linda Matthews was unraveling. Her voice had grown sharp, brittle. "Security, remove him now. He's obstructing boarding. This flight is delayed because of him." But Officer David Morales didn't move. He stared at the boarding pass in his hand, then at the glitching scale, then back at Linda. His instincts told him to stall. A ripple cut through the passengers when Samuel's phone buzzed again. He answered without hesitation, his words clear, intentional. "Yes, I'll authorize remotely. Confirm the vote is in progress. Directive 4 must pass today." He hung up, slid the phone into his jacket, and returned to stillness. That single exchange detonated through the waiting area. "Authorize." "Did you hear that?" someone whispered. "He's not begging for a seat. He's giving orders." "Who is this man?" Linda's cheeks flushed crimson. "Enough. He's bluffing." Some people rehearse lines to sound important. Don't be fooled. But Jessica Tran could no longer stay silent. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Miss Seven Entel Ellis, Matthews. His ticket isn't standard, it's flagged. Headquarters already knows his name. Gasps broke out. Passengers leaned forward, murmuring. Angela Morris caught it on her live stream, her voice shaky with disbelief. They just admitted it. His name is flagged. He's somebody big. Linda spun on Jessica, eyes blazing. Quiet. You'll regret undermining me. Jessica didn't retreat. She glanced at Samuel, then back at the crowd. It's true. He's not just another passenger. At that, Samuel finally moved. He bent to lift his leather briefcase from the floor. The motion was deliberate, unhurried. But as he straightened, the latch slipped. The briefcase spilled open. Papers fanned out, scattering across the terminal floor. The crowd inhaled as one. A young boy darted forward instinctively, scooping up a page. His mother hissed at him to return it, but not before she saw bold letters across the top. Confidential directive. Executive session. Her eyes widened. Another passenger, a middle-aged businessman, bent down and retrieved a document. He froze, reading aloud without thinking. Emergency directive. Appointment of acting CEO. His voice cracked. He looked up slowly at Samuel. This names you. The terminal fell silent. Even Linda staggered, her face draining of color. That can't be real. Samuel calmly collected the papers from trembling hands, sliding them back into his case. Careful with those, he said evenly. They tend to change the course of things. Angela's live stream caught every second. Her audience comments exploded. He's the CEO. He's the one in charge. They tried to humiliate their own boss. Jessica's lips parted. She had suspected. Now, she knew. Linda stumbled back a step, shaking her head as if denial could erase what she'd just seen. No, this is a trick. It has to be. But Samuel's eyes met hers, steady and unyielding. He closed the briefcase with a click that sounded like the strike of a gavel. Miss Matthews, he said, his tone as calm as it was final. From this moment forward, I am the one giving orders. The words hung heavy, undeniable. The crowd erupted half gasps, half cheers, and everywhere the flashing lights of recording phones. And with that declaration, the entire system teetered on the edge of collapse. Phones hovered in the air like lanterns, screens glowing as the crowd leaned closer. The briefcase sat locked again at Samuel Clark's side, but its contents, those glimpsed pages, had already shifted the atmosphere from suspicion to revelation. Samuel adjusted his glasses, then reached calmly into the case once more. He withdrew a leather folder, thick with embossed seals. He placed it on the counter with the deliberate weight of a judge setting down a verdict. Since there seems to be confusion, he said, his voice measured, let me clarify who I am and why this conversation is no longer optional. Linda Matthews shook her head furiously, her voice rising. This is theater. Staged documents, printed to intimidate. Anyone can type CEO on a piece of paper. Samuel didn't argue. He flipped open the folder and held up the first document so the closest passengers could see. Shareholder registry, he explained. 6 months ago, Clark Holdings acquired 22% of this airline's stock. That makes my firm the second largest owner of this company. A ripple tore through the crowd. Someone gasped audibly. Angela Morris whispered into her phone camera. He owns the airline. He literally owns it. Her live stream viewer count spiked instantly. Samuel laid down another page, this one stamped and notarized. Here is the clause from the shareholder agreement. Section 14. In the event of systemic failure or reputational crisis, any shareholder with more than 20% stake may assume emergency operational authority. His finger tapped the text, calm and precise. That clause is known as the ownership clause. It was ratified by this company's board of directors. And today, after the discriminatory treatment I've experienced here, that clause is triggered. Officer David Morales exhaled slowly, as if the weight of the words alone had pressed him backward. Even he understood now. This wasn't a stunt. This was law. Passengers craned their necks to glimpse the paper. Richard Cole, the businessman, whispered, "That's real language. That's legal." He looked at Linda, his eyes narrowing. "You've been lecturing your boss." Linda's lips moved soundlessly, denial colliding with fear. Samuel's gaze didn't leave her. "For 8 minutes, you insisted I did not belong here. You tampered with equipment. You raised your voice. You dismissed my ticket, my status, my identity, all under the assumption that appearance dictates belonging." He closed the folder softly. "Now you and your employer will reckon with the consequences." The silence that followed was unbearable. Every cough, every shuffle of a shoe echoed like thunder. Finally, Jessica Tran whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "It's true. I saw the crew messages. His name was flagged for executive clearance. He is the acting CEO." The crowd erupted, cheers mixed with gasps. Phones tilted higher, capturing Linda's ashen face, the way her hands trembled at her sides. Linda tried one last line of defense. "Even if you are who you say, you were disruptive. That justifies removal." Samuel didn't raise his voice. "Disruption? Ms. Matthews, what you've witnessed is not disruption. It is documentation. It is accountability. And as of this moment, I am the highest authority on this property, which means the disruption is not mine, it is yours." Passengers clapped, some shouting approval. The tension that had weighed heavy minutes ago now flipped into vindication. Morales straightened, his radio buzzing at his side. A voice crackled through. "Officer Morales, hold position. Headquarters is on the line with Mr. Clark directly." The final shred of doubt dissolved. Samuel looked out over the gathered witnesses, his voice carrying like a verdict delivered. "Ladies and gentlemen, the ownership clause exists to prevent failures of leadership. Today, you've seen such a failure, and beginning now, the system resets under my authority." Phones recorded, history captured itself. And Linda Matthews, once defiant, now stood silent, reduced to a figure, trembling under the weight of the very airline she thought she controlled. The gate area had transformed into an impromptu amphitheater. Passengers leaned on chairs, pressed against windows, held up phones like torches in the dark. Every eye was fixed on Samuel Clark, who now stood at the counter as if it were his boardroom podium. He opened the leather folder again, pulled out a single page, and handed it to Officer David Morales. "Directive 4. Effective immediately. Discriminatory conduct by any staff member is grounds for suspension pending review." Morales scanned the page, his brow furrowing. "This is signed by the board chair." He looked up slowly. "It's binding." Gasps swept the crowd. Samuel turned to Linda Matthews. His tone wasn't cruel, but it was firm, stripped of pretense. "Ms. Matthews, as of this moment, you are relieved of duty. Hand over your badge." Linda staggered back. "You can't do this. You..." Jessica Tran stepped forward, her voice shaking but resolute. "He can. The directive is real. Headquarters just confirmed his authority." Passengers erupted, some clapping, others recording with trembling hands. Linda's fingers twitched at her badge, but the weight of 100 eyes left her no escape. With a trembling hand, she unclipped it and set it on the counter. Samuel didn't smile. He simply nodded once, then addressed Morales. "Escort her off the floor with dignity. No shouting, no spectacle. She will undergo review, not humiliation." The distinction wasn't lost on anyone. He had been humiliated and chose not to return it. As Morales led Linda away, Samuel pulled out his phone. He typed quickly, then held it up so the screen's glow was visible. "Internal memo sent," he announced. "Effective today, every gate scale is recalibrated under third-party oversight. No staff member may alter weight readings without dual verification." A businessman muttered, "That's how you fix a system." Another whispered, "He's doing it live." In real time, Samuel placed the phone down, then lifted another document from his folder. Effective immediately, all first-class passengers are to be processed with identical courtesy regardless of appearance. Failure will result in immediate investigation. Jessica swallowed hard. That's unprecedented. Angela Morris's live stream was exploding with comments. "He's cleaning house right here in the terminal." Another line scrolled past. "This is history. We're watching policy change in real time." Samuel turned back to the gathered passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've been delayed. For that, I apologize. But sometimes, a delay uncovers what should never have been hidden. From today forward, this airline will not tolerate the treatment you just witnessed." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling. A woman near the window called out, "It's about time." Behind the counter, Jessica's own phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, then looked up at Samuel, eyes wide. "Sir, headquarters is already circulating your directives. They've sent them to every gate nationwide." The effect was instant. A rush of voices, a cascade of reactions. What had begun as one man against a single attendant now rippled outward through the entire company. Samuel closed the folder and lifted his briefcase. "The system has been reset," he said simply. And with that, the power that had once pressed down on him now bent to his will, visible to everyone watching, undeniable to anyone recording. Atlantic Air's headquarters rose like a glass fortress above downtown Atlanta. On the top floor, in a conference room with blinds half drawn against the morning sun, executives filed nervously into their leather chairs. The only sounds were the low hum of the air conditioning and the buzz of phones still vibrating, with the fallout from the night before. Every screen in the room glowed with the same image: Gate 17. Dozens of passengers with phones raised, their cheers erupting as Samuel Clark stripped a chief attendant of her badge. Millions had already watched. The incident wasn't a rumor to spin anymore. It was evidence. The door opened. Samuel stepped in, briefcase in hand, Officer David Morales trailing as witness. Without raising his voice, he set the case on the table, and the chatter died instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, calm but deliberate, "you've had a crisis for years. Yesterday, the world saw it. Today, it ends." Executives shifted uncomfortably. Martin Hale, the COO, forced a grin. "With respect, Mr. Clark, this was isolated." Samuel cut him off with a raised hand. "No, it wasn't. What happened at Gate 17 is the culture you let fester. Authority abused, dignity denied, profit above principle. And now, the world has the footage." He opened the briefcase, sliding a folder across the table. Morales confirmed each page with a nod. "These," Samuel said, "are 5 years of ignored complaints, discriminatory incidents buried, settlements paid to silent staff. You didn't fix problems. You hid them." The room froze. "Effective immediately, I'm invoking Section 14 of the Shareholder Agreement, Emergency Operational Authority. For the next 90 days, this company reports directly to me." Evelyn Sharp, the CFO, leaned forward, pearls glinting. "That's extraordinary. You can't possibly—" "I can," Samuel interrupted. "And I will. If you resist, these files go public within the hour. Then, lawsuits, boycotts, congressional hearings will bury you. Or we can choose reform swift, visible, genuine." Silence pressed against the glass walls. Morales spoke from the back. "He's right. It wasn't just policy failure. It was moral failure." Samuel nodded. "Which is why the first reform is accountability. Linda Matthews is suspended pending transparent review, with passengers included in the process." Evelyn's voice was tight. And beyond that, Samuel pulled out a tablet projecting bold letters. Emergency Reform Directive. Atlantic Air. 1. Independent oversight. Every discrimination claim reviewed by a third-party board. 2. Mandatory staff training. Real sessions with measurable outcomes. 3. Recalibration of boarding, baggage, and seating systems to eliminate unchecked authority. 4. Community reinvestment executive bonuses redirected into scholarships for underrepresented youth in aviation, not charity. Restitution. A murmur spread dismay, but also grudging respect. Hale muttered, "You can't overhaul decades of operations in months." Samuel leaned in. "Impossible? I restructured this company's future in 8 minutes at Gate 17. Don't tell me what can't be done. Tell me if you're willing to do it." No one answered. Pens soon scratched paper, signatures filling the directive. For the first time, Samuel allowed himself a small, resolute smile. The reset hadn't ended at Gate 17. Under fluorescent lights, before unwilling witnesses, reform had officially begun. The video from Gate 17 traveled faster than any marketing campaign Atlantic Air had ever engineered. Within hours, it was on every major network, introduced with the same refrain. The clip you're about to see has already been watched millions of times. Again and again, the footage rolled. Samuel Clark, standing steady while the terminal spun in chaos, his briefcase spilling open, papers scattering, and his calm announcement, "From this moment forward, I am the one giving orders." Talk show hosts leaned in with dramatic pauses. This wasn't just a passenger dispute. This was history. A black man, dismissed in first class, only to reveal he was the acting CEO of the airline. Audiences gasped at the reveal no matter how many times it aired. In a Birmingham church basement, women in wide-brimmed hats clustered around a tablet. "He never raised his voice," one said, hand at her throat. Another answered, "That's the power they told us we didn't have. Quiet strength. Patient strength." On the West Coast, college students in a dorm lounge dissected the footage. "Did you see how he documented everything? Like he knew the system would twist it against him," one said. A friend shook his head. "I wanted to shout at that flight attendant myself. He didn't even flinch. That's discipline." By Monday morning, ripples became waves. Analysts on financial shows debated stock futures. "Scandals usually sink a company," one said. "But this? It might save Atlantic Air. Clark is rebuilding in real time. Transparency is currency." Social media exploded, though anchors avoided the hashtags. People posted their own airport humiliations, each ending with the same refrain. "And then I saw Samuel Clark stand his ground." Competitors scrambled. Internal memos leaked. Conduct diversity audit immediately. Comparisons to Atlantic Air unavoidable. In Washington, a congresswoman pressed for stricter oversight of airline discrimination. If Mr. Clark can overhaul an airline in 90 days, Congress can demand accountability in less than 10 years. Inside Atlantic Air, the shock was visible. At a training in Chicago, one flight attendant blurted, "I don't want to be Linda Matthews." Laughter broke the tension, and trainers reminded them, respect would now be measured in action, not tone. The impact reached living rooms. In Queens, a girl watched with her grandfather. "They tried to kick him out because of his bag?" she asked. The man shook his head. "Not the bag, the skin. I've seen that look my whole life." When she frowned, "But he was the boss." He smiled. "Exactly. That's why we keep standing." Reporters camped at Atlantic Air headquarters. A manager admitted, "We don't have a choice." Honestly, it feels like relief. Not everyone celebrated. Editorials warned of power concentrated in one man. Yet even critics conceded. The public sided with Clark. He offered no interviews, no speeches, just work. Daily directives, signed in his name, posted publicly. Boarding improved, staff greeted with respect, Complaints were answered within minutes. Passengers told reporters, "It feels like a different airline." The phrase Gate 17 became shorthand. Sermon topic, protest slogan, even a jazz composition. Inside the company, executives who once resisted parroted Clark's language, documentation, not denial. Transparency over optics. Across barbershops, churches, classrooms, and homes, the story spread. Humiliation overturned. Dignity defended with precision. And without raising his voice, Samuel Clark became its symbol. 2 years later, the story of Gate 17 had grown far beyond a viral clip. It had become modern folklore taught in leadership programs, debated in law schools, invoked in sermons, and whispered across dinner tables where grandparents reminded their grandchildren. That's what happens when you refuse to move. In Washington, the marble corridors of the Capitol glowed under the afternoon sun. Inside a packed auditorium, banners stretched across the stage. National Aviation Reform Summit. The room was filled with airline executives, union leaders, community advocates, and reporters. At the podium stood Samuel Clark, his silver hair gleaming beneath the lights, his calm presence silencing the crowd before he spoke a word. 2 years ago, he began evenly. I was told I didn't belong in first class, that my appearance, not my ticket, determined my worth. Many of you saw the footage. What you didn't see was my choice in that moment. Not to lash out, but to stand still. To document. To wait until the system was forced to shift. Applause rippled through the hall. Clark held up a small leather notebook, its corners frayed from use. Every reform we built began here, not in a boardroom, not in a press release. Right here with ink, with proof, with patience. Behind him, images flickered across the projection screen. Airport staff in new training sessions, baggage scales monitored by independent inspectors. Passengers of every background boarding together without hesitation. The changes had not just taken root, they had become industry standard, copied even by rival airlines that could not afford to ignore them. Legacy, Clark continued, is not titles or percentages of stock. Legacy is the culture that remains when you are no longer in the room. My hope is simple, that no traveler, anywhere, will ever again hear the words, "You don't belong here." The applause swelled. Then Clark gestured toward the second row. A familiar figure rose. Linda Matthews. 2 years earlier, she had been the gate agent who tampered with a scale, denied his seat, and humiliated him before a restless crowd. Now she stood older, humbled, yet steady. Clark nodded toward her. This was my accuser. She stripped me of dignity, but she also faced her failures. Linda, would you share where you are now? Linda stepped to the microphone, her voice quiet but sure. I was suspended. I could have walked away bitter. Instead, I chose to learn. Today, I lead Atlantic Air's Diversity and Equity program. And if I've learned anything, it's this. Reform doesn't begin with perfection. It begins the moment you admit you were wrong. The room erupted not with mockery, but with respect. For the first time, Linda smiled without fear. Justice is not vengeance, Samuel concluded. Justice is restoration. That is the only legacy that endures. Outside, reporters swarmed. One called out, "Mr. Clark, do you see yourself as the man who changed aviation?" Samuel shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, I'm just a man who refused to step aside. Change came from everyone who refused to look away." That evening, back at his modest Atlanta home, Clark sat on the porch sipping tea. His granddaughter climbed into his lap. "Grandpa, is it true you owned an airline?" He chuckled. "No, sweetheart, I helped guide it. But own it? No one owns the skies. They belong to all of us." Months later, a bronze plaque was unveiled at Atlanta's main terminal, Here at Gate 17, Samuel Clark chose dignity over silence, patience over anger, justice over convenience. His stand transformed aviation and proved this truth: belonging is not granted. It is inherent. Travelers paused to read. Flight attendants touched it before shifts. Families posed for photos. And on countless planes crossing the night sky, passengers no longer worried whether they belonged. I want to take a moment to thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. What happened to Samuel Clark at Gate 17 wasn't just about a baggage scale or a seat on a plane. It was about dignity, about the quiet strength it takes to stand tall when the world tries to push you aside. His story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful action is not raising your voice but refusing to move. As I reflect on this journey, I'm reminded of all the times in our lives when we've been told we don't belong. When someone tried to measure our worth by appearances. Samuel's story is proof that injustice can be transformed into change and humiliation into legacy. That is a truth worth carrying with us wherever we go. If this story spoke to you, if it stirred something in your heart, I invite you to join this community. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and leave a comment with your own reflections. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next story of resilience and transformation.